everyone, welcome back to another video here on Play on GAA with me, Seamus Brady, your host, and for this I am joined by journalist with the 42, Fintan O'Toole, to give a recap and a run through of all the action which took place in the Allianz Football League Division 1 that happened over the weekend. Fintan, how did you find the games? I mean, all very tense, all very tight. I mean, you were saying to me off air there some statistic about how many games were only decided by a point. We had obviously, a draw there between Mayo and Galway, Donegal, Kerry being decided by a late McBurty point. Great to have Division 1 action back.
Yeah, it was brilliant. And like across the four divisions, it just shows kind of beating the same old drum, but how good a concept this is and how good a competition format it is, I think the stat was over 16 games across the four divisions. 9 of them were decided by margin of 3 points or less, which just shows the result was kind of in doubt at the end. I think there was only 2. There were double-digit wins. Leitrim beating Waterford and Derry Limerick were probably the ones that were convincing, but every other game was a bit in doubt. Loads of new managers on show, fresh faces in terms of players grabbing the limelight, particularly maybe Donegal, Quillen McColgan, one that kind of springs to mind, and lots of different storylines. And I think definitely a realization across the country that maybe before we need to start thinking about this differently. The way before we viewed late January games has to shift because of the fact we're looking at championship on the 9th of April. So you mentioned, let's say Mayo Galway was a cracking game. Usually on the 29th of January, Mayo then would be thinking of championship probably the end of May, 5 months. But I mean, they're out the 9th of May against Roscommon, who obviously had a brilliant win yesterday. So there's no real time to wait around. You're only just looking just over 2 months until the serious stuff starts to get going. So managers want to get a bit of momentum. Players have to be staking a claim for places. And it was a pretty strong start all around, and lots to get stuck into and discuss.
Yeah, without doubt. And you mentioned obviously Roscommon, their victory over Tyrone. Roscommon 3 goals and 11 points. Tyrone a goal and 12. The 2021 All-Ireland champions beaten in the first game of the Allianz League. And of course, there was lots of talk going into this game. The state that Tyrone are in, their performance in the McKenna Cup final against Derry was pitiful. And a lot of people are talking about, what is happening with this Tyrone side. So many players have left the camp since the All-Ireland victory. Maybe it's a case of that they've reached the top of the mountain. Maybe that is definitely a factor in sport across the board. But Davy Burke, not a bad start as Roscommon boss.
No, yeah, it was kind of two competing storylines here. Like very kind of difficult to analyze Tyrone in the sense that it looked like they had a lot of the hard work done. Anyone who's been to Dr. Hyde Park, like there's always a gale blowing in down to the graveyard end of that pitch, and it definitely does, especially at this time of year. It does have a major influence on matches. Like they got to halftime, losing 8-3 at the end of the first half, but managed to get to 8-5 at the break. Then they get a bit of momentum in the third quarter, chip away at the deficit, and then obviously they get that Kieran McGeary goal, maybe a bit fortunate on Morgan's attempt dropping short, he faces the net. And then they go 3 clear. And from there, you would expect them to win, but what you definitely wouldn't have expected in the remainder of the game, they would concede 3 goals. And okay, the third one, they're pushing up on a kick out because they're a point down. They've got the margin back again after the concession of the first 2, and it's a bit of a counter-attack and an overlap. But the other 2, from a Tyrone point of view, that's really going to be the big disappointment and the collapse in that sense. Tyrone haven't lost to Roscommon in over 20 years, which kind of says a lot. And then on the flip side, it shows what a big statement win this is for Roscommon, because they've had some bad days against Tyrone teams, not only in the league, but also in championship. I think it was the first year of the Super 8s. They got really, really badly beaten in Croke Park, and a lot of those players would kind of still be there. They've had 2 kind of long tenures between Kevin McStaben in charge and Anthony Cunningham, and then Burke, who was a very, very decent CV of work between Kildare under 20s, with close senior experience, club level in Kildare as well. But it's a really, really impressive win from their point of view, and their score taking really kind of stood out, some brilliant points in the first half, whether it was the likes of Brian Stack and Niall Daly from distance, or Ben O'Carroll, who looked a really good prospect. He would have been on that. I suppose everyone looks at the Offaly team that won the 20 a couple of years ago. Roscommon are getting a couple of players off that, like him and Keith Doyle now, and Robbie Dolan. And then the goals after half time. I don't know how Enda Smith saw Kieran Murtagh with that left-footed pass across, how he was alone, but it was brilliant. Bit of creativity. Yeah. Second one was a bit messier. Didn't really kind of see from looking at the TV footage who actually flicked it in. Murtagh was giving it to Murtagh, but it was kind of a few players there who got the last touch. And then if there's the Carroll, I thought, at the end, he had 2 players right next to him, so if he actually doesn't get the shot away, people will be saying to him, you should just pass it across and it's palm into the net. But he was pretty clinical in drilling it past Niall Morgan. And the thing about Roscommon is just it's a repetitive thing at this stage, but they're such a yo-yo team in the league, and they must be fed up with it. They must want some stability to spend more than one season in a row in the same division, which is something they haven't done in a couple of years in that kind of zone between, too good for Division 2, but just not quite able to kind of get a foothold in Division 1. So it's a pretty unforgiving fixture list for them. It looked from the outset. So to get a win at home against Tyrone, that's just huge for them and kind of sets them up nicely. And flip side Tyrone, you're already under a little bit of pressure heading into the Donegal game, I think it is next week.
Yeah, without doubt, and especially a Donegal side that obviously beat Kerry. Just before we move on from this game, though, there was a massive potential turning point moment, and that was Tyrone were leading by 3. They got that goal chance, Darren McCurry, and he just let it slip out of his hands. Could that have changed everything if that went in?
I think so, yeah. I mean, that would have been a big turning point. I mean, like Roscommon were able to kind of weather the storm of 1 goal conceded, but if you concede a second, and you're facing against the wind and all this kind of psychological thing gets into your head, but they managed to kind of, I suppose, survive that, and then they bring the Smiths start coming into it and they coming on, and then the timing of the goal, you could see the home crowd really getting into it, and then they followed up with the second goal. Similarly, both goals kind of making headway on the left wing, managing to cut inside that way, and obviously the kind of finish, especially for the first one from Kieran Murta, was superb. So you're absolutely right. It just changed the whole complexion of the game, and Roscommon's 2 goals meant they had a little bit of a cushion, and even though Tyrone were kind of chipping away, getting a couple of points, I think they got it back to 210 to 112. First of all, we should probably also credit Niall Daly overall. I mean, he kicked 3 points in play. Getting that kind of return from your wing back is a huge, huge thing, and probably shows the benefit of, if you're playing against a packed defence, or not a packed defence, I suppose, it's kind of the general kind of play now. A lot of teams do like to kind of get bodies back, which is understandable. But in order to beat that kind of press, if you have guys who can kick confidently and accurately from distance, it's a huge help. And Daly kicked a few beauties,
Yeah, without doubt. And it was their bench that made the difference for me in the end. Enda Smith, Kieran Murta, these guys came on and put in outstanding performances. Even David Murray came on, went straight on to a red hot Darren McCurry, and McCurry's influence relatively quiet. And because when he came on in the second half, he immediately kicked a couple of points, looked sharp, and then Murray comes on straight onto him. And that's, helped in turning the tide in Roscommon's favour. Another Connacht clash, of course, Mayo Galway, 111 to 28. We were saying off air just before we started that this was probably our favourite game of the weekend. A real battle there in McHale Park. Ryan O'Donoghue with the last kick of the game hits a beauty to level it up. Probably a fair result.
I think so, yeah. But at the same time, still one Galway will be kind of cursing because they had possession. You could see what Colin Sweeney was trying to do. I can't remember who was actually beside him. He was just trying to pop that kick pass, but maybe if he drives the ball into the terrace, probably easy to say now, or he gets it further down the field. But I mean, O'Donoghue, having missed kind of a similar one from that position a few minutes beforehand, showed a real nerve to kind of land that, and it was a beautiful kick. Just thought there was a great energy to this contest. I appreciate I was a TV viewer for these 2 games on Saturday night, so you kind of don't want. There is a bit of a difference, but the Dublin-Kildare game seemed a bit more kind of a slow burner in comparison. Look, it's a bit harder to generate atmosphere kind of on TV when you're watching when it's a bigger ground, but like McHale Park, there was 13,500 in for it. Lots of kind of external factors, I think, contribute to that. Lee Keegan is retired. He's in the pundit's chair. Kevin McStay's first day out. Galway are the All-Ireland finalists, whereas for so long, Mayo were coming into these games as having been one of the top 2 sides statistically in the country over the previous year, but now Galway kind of the top dog, and obviously Galway have lost a couple of players now with the news that Liam Silk last weekend, he's going to be staying in New Zealand. Kieran Malloy is obviously out for the year with a cruciate, so it was interesting to see with a lot of new faces, some new Mike Cullen guys like Neil Mulcahy making his debut, Daniel O'Flaherty being back for Galway, then names like Bob Toohey, David McBride, guys who've been coming on the fringes the last couple of years, but there was definitely a sense looking at that Mayo team sheet. It's it's not as familiar as it was a couple of years ago, but it was interesting then when it came to the finale. We talked about, you mentioned there, the Roscommon guys coming off the bench. You're looking at like Aidan O'Shea, Killian O'Connor, Kevin McLaughlin all coming on. And in fairness, like Killian O'Connor, the contribution he made with that point did really, really well to engineer it as they executed a turnover. Just thought it was really exciting, really, really fast paced, huge energy to it. Not perfect display by either side. Certain things that they won't kind of be happy with. You think of the matchup that ended up that Matthew Tierney is like on, Aidan Norman is having a kind of a smaller stature size corner forward. He's the one ends up being the last one back. That's a bit of a breakdown in communication. You think that he's isolated inside with Tierney for the first goal, but then obviously Galway cough up possession at the end. And I suppose the other thing that stands out, another sensational James Carr goal in this fixture. Unbelievable finish, and like versus run initially was really, really good. he kind of came out very, very deep and then looped back in late and was able to come onto the possession like that, and just really enjoyed it. Really good game to watch.
Yeah, it's like James Carr to me has the potential to be one of the best footballers in the country. I mean, you look at what he can do, and it's like even the points that he scored. Like he scored one against Dublin, where I remember looking at him kick it, and I was like, "That is an amazing point." Like I don't know how it was like that Daniel Flynn-esque. Like he's an absolutely outrageous athlete, and if Mayo can get the best out of him, they have one of the best forwards in the country because no one seems to hit the goals that James Carr hits. I mean, if he was 1-on-1 with the keeper, he'd smash it into the top corner anyway. Like that's the type of finishes that he goes for. But yeah, I mean, like talk me through then the other goals. Obviously, you talked me through Matthew Tierney's one, very clever finish there to palm it past Colin Reap. But then, of course, Sean Kelly, that second goal, very clever timing run and a very nice finish by Sean Kelly. He played it down himself in the post-match interview, but he was a very smart finish. And yeah, I mean, that did put Galway in the ascendancy for a while before Mayo did pull them back.
Yeah, I thought the Kelly O'Donoghue duel was just brilliant to watch, and like the fact that they both came up with big scores, won a goal and won a point. But like Kelly's just a brilliant footballer and how versatile he is. He can kind of do a job anywhere on the pitch. Like you see, he starts lined up for corner forward nominally for Moy Cullen in the All Ireland Club semi-final. He starts full back then yesterday. He's just super to watch. I suppose like this game, I suppose, like it was kind of is there a bit of a change in the guard, I guess, going on in Connacht is probably one of the kind of themes about it. As I said, there was a lot of kind of change when you look at that Mayo team sheet, a lot of kind of novelty in the faces, novel faces kind of on view. Galway still started with was it 10 or 11 of the All-Ireland final winning team, but I guess it's the guys that kind of were missing. The defenders are going to be out long term, so there's kind of a few kind of gaps to be filled there, and obviously Shane Walsh out of the equation as well. Like you mentioned, Carr, obviously sensational to watch. You'd have to credit Damon Comer as well, some of the marks that he took down, some of the fielding in the first half. But there's one time, I think the one that Conor Gleeson launched on top of him, you kind of all the kind of sophisticated game patterns, but this was literally the goalkeeper just booting it high and long down the middle, and Comer able to kind of catch it, So kind of lots to admire, kind of on both sides, and I suppose a template for or launchpad for them, looking ahead to the next few weeks.
Yeah, without doubt, and it would be interesting to see them lock horns again. Obviously, future down the line, potential change of the guard, but Mayo will have for sure something to say about that. Moving on then, Donegal against Kerry. 13 points to Donegal, 1-9 to Kerry. Paddy McBurty hits a late trademark point, the new Donegal captain, getting the points for Donegal. Jack O'Connor will have something to say about the result, obviously, the Quaylen McCongle point. But a fantastic victory, no doubt, for Paddy Carr, new Donegal manager, post-Michael Murphy era, and they're off with a win.
Yeah, I suppose we're getting the theme of, I think, new managers needing a good bounce this weekend. Davy Burke gets a win. Max Day, given the circumstances, managed to get a draw. And I think that was a pretty big one for Paddy Carr because, look, let's face it, there's the element of one, Michael Murphy not being around anymore, and he's been such an iconic figure for them over the last few years. But the other is that this was a pretty different Kerry side. I mean, it was only 5 of the All-Ireland winning team started. I know you had another few that came on as subs. But look, they are pretty stretched at the moment in terms of they need to give some guys a longer break after club exertions. David Moran is retired. And then there's lots of guys you get this after All-Ireland win sometimes, guys with kind of niggly injuries that kind of need to be cleared up. Gavin White's probably the more longer term one, but Paul Gainey, Stephen O'Brien, Sean O'Shea, that's 3 defenders that kind of have a bit of work that kind of needs to be corrected. So gives the other guys a chance to impress, I guess. And Darragh Roach probably was one that kind of grabbed it, kicked 3 nice first half points, but maybe Donegal's need was a little bit greater. Now, having said that, as you pointed out, Jack O'Connor would say that was a pretty critical first half decision, and he was pretty unhappy with the communication with the linesman and umpire, which is a fair point, and it does happen a lot in kind of different games, But I think for Donegal, in terms of kind of maybe showing that there's a bit of kind of life after Murphy, kind of a new chapter in there as well. Obviously with Bonner gone and Carr coming in, probably the type of rousing point that they needed, rousing win that they needed. And you look at it now, they have a bit of momentum going into next week against Tyrone before the break after the first 2 rounds. Whereas Tyrone, because they've lost, if you've lost your first 2 games, you're kind of behind or on the back foot straight away.
Yeah, without doubt. And if Donegal do beat them, Tyrone will 100% be looking over their shoulder. It's a great start for Donegal. They were without Ryan McHugh. Obviously, I think they were out. Who else were they without? They were without Owen Bon Gallagher, sorry.
Yeah.
No Owen Bon Gallagher, no Ryan McHugh. They're 2 big players as well. So, to be without the two of them and to get the victory.
Yeah, huge. I mean, they've had a major influence, obviously, in Donegal's play over the last few years. But then, Conor O'Donnell, he got, I think it was Tyrone League game last year. He got the goal, a pretty key goal. Good from their point of view to see him kicking 3 points yesterday. And McColgan, obviously, was another one that really kind of showed up well, getting 3 points in kind of difficult conditions when you're only scoring 13. If two of your newcomers are getting 6, relative newcomers, this was in the case of O'Donnell, that's kind of a positive sign going forward. But it's just obviously about kind of replicating that now and getting a little bit of consistency going, which has probably been a bit of a failing on Donegal's part in a wider sense over the last few years.
Oh, without doubt, they were the most inconsistent team in the country over the last 2 years. The final game then in Division 1 was Armagh Monaghan. Armagh 114, Monaghan a goal and 12. And myself and Luke, we were saying, look, Armagh always, come flying out the blocks in the first game of the league. You think about last year, the performance that they put in against Dublin. And coming into this game against Monaghan, it's Vinnie Corey's first game there in charge there. Monaghan have lost the likes of Colin Walsh, Drew Wiley. And it was a close game. Monaghan led at stages. Stephen O'Hanlon put them 3 points clear at one point with a lovely score. But Armagh just always seemed, in my opinion, to have a little bit of an extra gear that they could go to in this game.
They did. Now, they probably benefited from the way the goal kind of went in. Obviously, now look, it was a big mistake. Turning Kelly seizes on it, but that's obviously a big shift in kind of momentum for them. And then they grasp that chance to kind of stay in the game and get a foothold in it. Maybe not as eye-catching as the manner in which they won the first game last year against Dublin and McHale Park, with O'Neill kind of causing such wreck that night, but probably as kind of influential and as significant for them in terms of getting a good start. And you just have to think that they're a team that would strike you that, there's a debate kind of who wants to win this league, given that it's going to go so hard up against the championship with the final on the 2nd of April. If you think that for Armagh, it would be a big thing to kind of win a league title and get some kind of silverware on the board. You still had O'Neill getting 4 points, Stephen Campbell and Aidan Nugent, Andrew Murnan all getting 2 each, and different kind of array of scorers. And kind of a positive start for them, I think, in the light of, you think, a last year's championship ended for them, and they would have had a lot of regrets when they see the way Armagh or Galway went on to the All-Ireland final and were kind of there in contention for 60-65 minutes. When you've lost to them on penalty shootout, that's a kind of a tough one to take. So yeah, I think it's a good start for them for the year. And like you said, probably always just had a little bit extra in the locker.
Agreed, yeah. And I think, look, this could be the year for Armagh to really make a push. And I think I have tipped them to win this league. The main reason is what you said there, who is going to really go for it. And I think Armagh will really want some silverware with this McGeeney era. So I think they're going to proper go for it. And then obviously a tale of two goalkeepers. You mentioned about Beggin's mistake, but on the other hand, Ethan Rafferty is quickly becoming one of Armagh's trademarks and one of their key weapons. I mean, he already has become that. He's pretty much mastering the role. He looked really, really good again today. A lovely score in the first half. And it's become so normal, but he does it so well.
Yeah, and like, in fairness, this was a game that kind of probably exposed kind of, goalkeepers kind of having a different array of skills. Like the Beggin kick for his free was superb, obviously what Rafferty did. But, we've seen some teams over the last couple of years, bringing the keeper out, it looks a bit uncomfortable. What are they actually kind of adding to the game? You think of the goal that Damien Comer scored in the All-Ireland semi-final when the net is unguarded. Obviously, you're punishing an opponent there in Derry that day. But Rafferty just brings so much to it. I mean, it was pretty thrilling, to be honest, to watch what he was doing when you think of last year, especially against Galway, the way he was coming forward and punching holes, and the fact that he's actually breaking the line as opposed to maybe just popping it to someone else on the shoulder, And the early signs are pretty positive that that's obviously something they're going to utilise again next year. But obviously, I suppose he's not a traditional goalkeeper in the sense that he does play outfield for his club, and obviously his previous experience of that, kind of at different levels, But he's brilliant to watch in full flight, And it doesn't look like they're going to be abandoning that tactic going forward.
Oh, without doubt. I mean, I can't wait to see it. I think they're contenders for the league for sure, and dark horses for the All-Ireland. I really, really like this Armagh side, and if they can get the likes of Oisin O'Neill back fit, I think, yeah, Ireland, watch out. That has been the Division 1 recap here on Play on GAA, guys. Thank you so much for giving us your time today. My thanks to Fintan for coming on as well. And until the next one, guys, take care.